Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. You know, earlier this month I was supposed to be heading to Southern California to go and drive the fully redesigned second generation 2021 Toyota Mirai. Now unfortunately, with the tougher restrictions that's being put into place because of the pandemic, Toyota had to cancel that event for journalists that lived on the opposite end of the country, which is why, as you can see, I'm standing here walking in 6 inches of snow while some of my colleagues who live out in California are out there enjoying the beautiful sunny weather and driving the 2021 Mirai. Now, thankfully, I've got a very good friend and colleague of mine. You guys know him as Alex Dykes from Alex on Autos. He was kind enough to do a video on behalf of Redline because Toyota actually sent him the Mirai for a couple days in his home area in San Jose, California. So let's go ahead and cue over to Alex's videos and we're gonna see what he thinks about the Mirai and see if Toyota's done a really good job with actually redesigning this very important fuel cell vehicle.
Hey everybody, if you didn't notice, I am not Sofian Bey from Redline Reviews. I'm actually Alex from Alex on Autos, but due to the ongoing global pandemic, Sofian was not able to come out to California to take a look at this new 2021 Toyota Mirai. This is the first production rear-wheel drive hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicle, and it is significantly more attractive than the current generation Toyota Mirai, which looks sort of like a strange blend of Camry and Prius together. That generation Mirai was actually based on the Toyota Prius, but this is now based on the Lexus LS that you see right behind it. There's a practical reason for that. In addition to this being quite simply better looking than the current generation Mirai with that long hood profile that it gets from the Lexus LS, the LS has a very large engine bay. It's a luxury car. It was designed for rear-wheel drive applications with a standard twin-turbo V6, hybrid systems available, probably optional V8s in the future. This vehicle benefits from that because it has a larger engine base. That means the entire fuel cell stack is now able to live under the hood rather than partially under the passenger compartment. And of course, it makes it look absolutely gorgeous. Structurally, the big difference between the Mirai and the Lexus LS is that this is a short wheelbase version of the LS. So back here, the rear doors are considerably smaller, the wheelbase is shorter as well, and then we get a little bit more of a truncated rear end design. This reminds me a little bit of the Audi A7, sort of a fastback, sportback design. Moving around to the rear, we also find a little bit of a different design than we find in the Lexus LS, but obviously they look related. Moving all the way around to the rear, we obviously have a bit of a Lexus vibe going on here, full LED tail lamps, obviously no visible exhaust tips down there, and you will notice that the trunk lid is a little bit shorter than we find in the larger Lexus sedan. Full disclosure for folks that haven't seen me over at Alex on Autos, I happen to own a Hyundai Nexo, so I'm pretty familiar with hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Logically, the big difference for the Mirai and the Nexo is that this is the only hatchback wannabe crossover that's available with a hydrogen fuel cell stack. So this has a lot more cargo room, but it's not going to drive as fun as the Mirai. The Mirai is now a rear-wheel drive vehicle with pretty wide tires on it, and it's not going to look quite as sexy as the Mirai either. Now let's take a look under the hood. This has a pretty significant update versus the previous generation fuel cell stack. So Toyota didn't simply repackage the existing fuel cell under the bigger hood that we find in the new Mirai. This is a completely different unit. It's gone from 370 cells down to 330 cells, so it's much more compact than before. Previously, it used to occupy about 32 liters of space in the vehicle. Now it's down to 24. And that's the reason that in the previous generation model, it wasn't just under the hood. It was a portion under the passenger compartment as well. But even though it's become smaller, it's become a lot more energy dense. Power output has gone from 114 kilowatts to 128 kilowatts, and that has allowed this to go up to 182 horsepower total. Some of the power comes from the fuel cell, the remainder comes from the battery pack that is in the rear. At the moment, this is the most powerful fuel cell stack currently in production. The Hyundai Nexo, for instance, has a 95 kilowatt fuel cell stack, so it's about 30% more powerful than the one that we find in the Hyundai. You won't find the electric motor under the hood because it's now living in the rear of the Mirai. This is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. It produces 182 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque. The motor is used in other Toyota vehicles. Toyota said that they were really interested in parts commonality and really trying to improve the production ability of the fuel cell stack. So supposedly they're going to be producing a lot more of these than they were able to before, and part of that is the electric motor. This borrows the electric motor from one of their V6 powered hybrid models, most likely the Lexus RX, although Toyota wasn't horribly specific about that. This now carries 5.6 kilograms of hydrogen on board. That is not the most in the segment, even though Toyota is claiming best-in-class range of 400 miles on hydrogen. That's because this is significantly more efficient than any fuel cell vehicle before it, even though we have wider tires, 235 or 245 width tires, depending on the version of the Mirai that you get. This particular model is the XLE. There's also a limited trim. It comes in 5 colors and those 2 different trim levels. Versus the competition, the Clarity will hold 4.1 kilograms of hydrogen, and the Nexo tops the bunch at 6.3 because it's much less aerodynamic. It's shaped more like a bubble, and that's why it needs more hydrogen to give you 380 miles of maximum range versus 400 in the Clarity.
So the Mirai may be a really sleek sedan, however, everybody in America wants crossovers, and that's going to be immediately apparent when Alex gets into the trunk of the Mirai and shows us his exclusive trunk comfort index.
One of the other reasons that Lexus borrowed a rear-wheel drive platform is that it had a larger tunnel. They've put one of the tanks in the tunnel, and then the other tank sits right behind the rear seats. Rather unfortunately, that does compromise cargo capacity. So let's take a look at that. If we pop the trunk right here, we find what looks to be about 13 cubic feet of cargo space. Toyota, for some reason, has not given us a detailed specification. We have a little bit of storage space under the load floor, not a whole lot of storage space, and obviously no folding rear seats because there's the fuel tank right back there. But if you've watched the Alex and Auto series before, it's now time for our exclusive trunk comfort index. Things are definitely a little compact back here, but I love the hidden hinge design. Now let's hop inside and see how things are. The door has a pretty pleasing thunk sound to it. Definitely sounds a little bit different than we find in the Lexus LS. Now, although the body and the structure of this is related to the Lexus, the interior is definitely not. This is very, very Toyota. So we have basically the same infotainment system that we find in the Toyota Highlander hybrid, and then a 7-inch LCD instrument cluster right behind the steering wheel. I think this is the right arrangement. For some reason, there are a number of vehicles on the market where we have a big LCD instrument cluster and then a teeny tiny infotainment screen, and I've never understood that. Oddly enough, these screens are exactly the same size as the screens that we find in the Hyundai Nexo, although the software that we find in this screen just isn't quite as attractive as the Hyundai's. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration is standard in here, but it will only occupy a portion of the screen versus the entire screen like we do find in the Hyundai. Either of these options is going to be significantly more modern and really more luxurious looking on the inside than we find in the Honda Clarity. Let's go in for a closer look. You can see we have this approximately 7-inch LCD instrument cluster. If you get the limited trim, then we also have a heads-up display. Rather unfortunately, this XSE trim does not. The displays in this system are pretty similar to any Toyota hybrid. The most important thing to remember about this vehicle is that a hydrogen car really is an electric car, and it sort of is like a blend between electric car and hybrid because we have the fuel cell stack, we have a battery in the rear, and an electric motor that drives the vehicle forward. Over here you can see our range estimate, 203 miles. The steering wheel design is pretty typical for Toyota. It looks a little bit like a Toyota cross between a Lexus and a Toyota steering wheel. The buttons are all on the front, you can see right there. No paddles or anything like that on the back. I do wish we had some regen paddles like we find in the Nexo currently. Going in for a closer look on the infotainment system, again, you can see that CarPlay is only on one side, and you can swap sides if you'd rather have CarPlay on the other side. We have some pretty typical energy displays that we find in their other hybrid vehicles. This system is definitely very, very similar to one that we find in the Toyota Highlander. If you get the limited trim, then we also get heated and ventilated rear seats and 3-zone automatic climate control. This model only has 2-zone automatic climate control. A lot of soft touch materials going on the dashboard. This definitely feels much more premium than the previous version. Going down the dashboard, we find the same sort of joystick style shifter that we found in the Prius and other models before. BR is increased engine braking or regen braking, whatever you want to think of that. It's a P button right there for park. We have the controls for the dual zone automatic climate control system over there. Some drive mode buttons, auto brake hold, parking brake right there. 2 pretty decently sized cup holders, a Qi wireless charging mat, and a reasonably sized center console. A feature that we've seen in the Mirai before is this H2O button right here that purges the fuel cell stack of water. So if you don't want this to drip on your driveway, you can go ahead and press that button in advance. We have a large air vent right there below. This is where we find the trip odometer buttons, things like that. 360-degree camera button, auto high beam button right over there as well. Jumping into the back seat, the first thing that I noticed is that this sport back design means that the doorway is a little bit low for me at 6 feet tall. I'm definitely taller than Sofian, so keep that in mind. With the front seat comfortably adjusted for me, I have about 1.5 inches of legroom left. Obviously, you'll find a lot more room inside the Lexus LS. Now, an interesting twist with their hydrogen fuel cell lineup is that The rumor mill is telling us that there will be a Lexus version of the Mirai at some point. I don't know whether it's going to be longer than this or not. The rear seats are pretty comfortable. I have a reasonable amount of headroom back here. My head is definitely touching the ceiling. There is an optional panoramic moonroof. If you get the limited trim, that's where you'll find that one. Back here we have some air vents, some USB charge-only ports, and we have a 5th seat belt. So this is technically a 5-seater, but as you can see, we have a really large hump right here in the middle. That's because there is a hydrogen tank right there in the middle. There's not a lot of headroom going on here. So although technically we have 5 seats, this really should be the optional seat for children or a naughty person, something along those lines. I suppose you could put a child seat right there in the middle. We do have a fold-down center armrest. This one has cup holders in it. If you get the limited trim, then we get an LCD back here, and we have a rear window shade that's available as well.
Now, with only 181 horsepower on tap, don't expect the Mirai to be fast, but as we go into the driving scene, you'll notice that Alex doesn't exactly drive quite as aggressively as I do, and he also favors comfort over sportier driving dynamics, and that's honestly just a matter of taste.
With just over 180 horsepower on tap, obviously this is not going to be winning any races against a Model S or a Model 3. Compared to the rest of the hydrogen competition, this feels a little bit peppier, but in real 0 to 60 numbers, this is substantially similar to the Clarity and the Nexo. But that's really where the similarity ends, because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So if you really dig deeper into the throttle, you get that rear-end rotation, and we get the excellent neutral handling dynamics that you'd expect out of a vehicle that has a 50-50 weight balance. This really does feel like a 182 horsepower Lexus LS 500 out on the road. Admittedly, an LS 500 with the steel spring suspension, not the adaptive air suspension. And I have to say, that's one thing that I wish the Mirai had gotten, either a general adaptive suspension or the air suspension that we find in the Lexus LS. I think it really would have given this a unique feel in the segment. The Tesla Model S, for instance, has an adaptive air suspension, and the Model S is right about the same size on the outside as this Mirai. Now, on the inside, the Mirai is a little bit tighter than the Model S because this has a very similar format to a gasoline-powered vehicle, and honestly, kind of a similar feel out on the road as well, because the fuel cell is up there under the hood, the electric motor is right back there on the rear axle. There's also a hybrid-sized battery pack right back there in the rear as well. The weight location in the vehicle, the center of gravity, etc., feels very much like a gasoline-powered vehicle. It's difficult to talk about green vehicles without talking about the elephant in the room, which is, of course, the Tesla product line. So versus the Tesla product line, we definitely get a little bit more body roll, a little bit more tip and dive in this, because the suspension is tuned towards the softer side of things, and also the center of gravity just isn't as low. But this is still an awful lot of fun. I was really surprised how much fun the Mirai really is to drive. And that was not something that I had expected. When Toyota said that they were moving this to rear-wheel drive, I was kind of expecting them to do a more half-hearted attempt. I'd expected them to put relatively skinny, low-rolling resistance tires on it in order to give it 400 miles of range. And that's not what we find. This model has the narrowest tires available, 235 width. If you get the limited trim, it bumps up to 245 width tires. And these definitely have the grip to give this a good sorted feel out on the open road. Logically, this is not going to be a corner carver in the way that a Tesla Model 3 is. However, this has kind of a different mission in mind. This definitely is a more relaxed, more highway cruiser kind of ride. Personally, the suspension tune is just fine with me because I love a big, softly sprung sedan. Now, this is not as big as something like the Lexus LS, of course, but it has that similar feel out on the road. One thing that surprised me is that cabin noise is a little bit higher than I had expected in here. It definitely seems to be a little bit closer to base Camry and base Accord models, and a lot louder in here than something like the Lexus LS. So if you were expecting hydrogen LS, then you may want to wait to the upcoming rumored Lexus hydrogen vehicle. A lot of details are still sketchy on that one, but supposedly we should be seeing it probably next year, maybe late next year. It's probably going to be much closer in interior design and interior quality to the Lexus LS, definitely a lot quieter, perhaps may handle better, and perhaps maybe have a little bit more power, but don't hold your breath just yet. It's a little bit difficult to talk about fuel economy and range, but I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up getting 400 miles of range in the real world. As I've experienced in other fuel cell vehicles, the fuel economy and range prediction seems to be pretty accurate compared with a lot of battery electric vehicles. So I would assume that as long as you're treating the throttle gently and you're keeping this under the speed limit or at the speed limit, you should definitely be able to get 400 miles out of a tank of hydrogen. One thing that I've noticed before is that the range estimate in a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, whether we're talking about this, the Clarity, or the Nexo, does not seem to drop as fast as we find in a battery electric vehicle, regardless of which battery electric vehicle we're talking about. And now to the nitty-gritty. How much will the Mirai cost? Well, this is a tricky question to talk about because at the time I'm filming this, Toyota has not announced pricing for the 2021 model just yet. Hopefully by the time you're watching this video and the time this goes on sale, obviously there will be a price tag. It's most likely going to be around $60,000 starting. But unfortunately, when it comes to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, pricing is a little bit trickier than simply that number because, of course, there are tax credits, there are rebates available, and you have to live in the right state in order to even get a Mirai in the first place. These are going to be sold in California. They should also be available in Hawaii because those are the only two states in the country right now where you can buy hydrogen to fill them. You can also, of course, get hydrogen in Canada, large portion of Europe, Japan, South Korea, etc. The previous generation Mirai was about $60,000. However, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles qualify for an $8,000 federal tax credit. They also qualify for almost $5,000 of California rebates. And then in addition to all of that, $15,000 of fuel credit. That's because when you buy a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, really any fuel cell vehicle at the moment in the United States, the fuel is essentially included for the first 3 years. As often happens, Toyota announced pricing for the Mirai literally 20 minutes after it left my driveway. So let's dive into the pricing that we now know about. For 2020, it started at $58,550. For 2021, it's going to be $49,500. That's a pretty significant price drop. If you want the limited trim, which is not the model that I was driving, that's going to be $66,000. Options are fairly limited. There's a special color package for $425. The advanced technology package on the XLE trim, the one that we were driving, had that. That's $1,410. And then if you want the 20-inch chrome alloy wheels on the limited trim, that's going to be $1,120. All in, it is less expensive than the last model, and there's some additional state and federal tax incentives and rebates available as well. There's a federal tax credit of $8,000. Now that does expire at the end of this calendar year, but it's likely going to get renewed next year. And in California, there is a $4,500 rebate program that also expires at the end of the year, but will most likely get renewed next year as well. On top of all that, all purchases and leases of the Mirai are going to get a $15,000 hydrogen fuel card that's valid for 3 years. Basically, you drive your hydrogen fuel cell car as much as you want, you stick that card into any hydrogen fuel pump, and it will just charge Toyota for the cost of that hydrogen up to $15,000. So depending on exactly how you want to do the math there, it means that the effective price of your Mirai, assuming you could consume all of that hydrogen within 3 years, would be around $22,000. Of course, after that hydrogen fuel cell card has expired, you would have to pay for the hydrogen yourself, and that is going to be just about as expensive as operating the average Toyota Camry, because hydrogen is a little pricey in California right now. The target price for a kilogram of hydrogen around the world in fuel cell vehicles like this is supposedly going to be around $1 to $1.50 a kilogram, but at the moment it's about 14 times higher than that. Anyway you slice it, however, the Mirai has become a lot less expensive, and it is now the least expensive hydrogen fuel cell vehicle in America right now. You can also lease it apparently for $499 or $549 if you want the limited trim. According to Toyota, they've planned to produce 4 to 5 times the number of Mirais, so you should expect to see a few thousand of these at least a year being delivered in California. The Mirai is the kind of vehicle that you want to look at if you want bleeding edge technology. Hydrogen fuel cells are still really in their infancy. There aren't very many Mirais in the United States. There are only a few thousand, about 4,000 to 5,000 or so in the California market right now. And then according to Toyota, this model is going to be more popular. So you should expect to see maybe 10,000 to 15,000 of these over their lifetime in the United States. Obviously, there are going to be far more fuel cells sold in Japan and possibly other world markets. That's another logical reason that this ended up a sedan rather than a crossover, because in those markets, sedans seem to be just a little bit more popular. But you should absolutely not take a look at this Mirai as a discount Lexus LS. There's a significant difference between the two models. Obviously, the Mirai reminds me a lot of the Lexus LS out on the road, but it's not as refined. It obviously doesn't have a Lexus logo on it, and it's not as big as this Lexus LS. Now, again, there are a lot of rumors about Lexus producing a mid-size or perhaps a full-size hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. It's obviously going to be very closely related to the Mirai and very closely related to this Lexus LS. If you're looking for all the luxury trappings in your fuel cell vehicle, that's the model that you should wait for. However, with 400 miles of hydrogen range, this is the kind of vehicle that you could definitely drive from the San Francisco Bay Area to Los Angeles without filling up. Obviously, you'd be able to fill up on the other end there in Los Angeles or in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's an entirely easy vehicle to live with. That's the one thing that I've noted with my own Nexo, is that I can make it from the Bay Area down to Santa Barbara or down to the Los Angeles area on one tank of hydrogen. I fill up and then I go on from there. But I very rarely leave the state in a vehicle that I'm driving, so for me it hasn't been too much of a problem. Now, I have to say, if I were in the market for a new hydrogen fuel cell vehicle and I didn't need the larger cargo area, the Mirai is definitely something that I would consider. I love the extra power, I love the handling ability, and I love the extra range that we find in this model versus the Hyundai. Rather unfortunately, it has a teeny tiny cargo area in comparison. Be sure and let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and thanks to Sofian for posting this video on his channel. And of course, you're welcome, Sofian, for helping you out and filming the Mirai for you. I'll see all of you later.
So now that we're back on the East Coast, let's go over Alex's review on the 2021 Mirai. Now, first of all, I want to definitely mention that he is right in the sense by saying the new Mirai is far more sexy versus the previous generation, which to me had the same kind of ugliness that you associate with the current generation Prius. Unfortunately, since I haven't had a chance to drive one yet, I've only seen one in person, I'm going to have to wait until I can actually get my hands on it, where I'll do another video and you guys can see my thoughts on it. Toyota did announce pricing later, and they did say that this vehicle is $9,000 less expensive versus the previous generations, at around $53,000 for the base version. That's the one that Alex is driving, probably going up to around $60,000 for the fully loaded versions. It does make the Mirai a lot more affordable if you guys live in the area. Of course, here on the East Coast, Toyota doesn't offer the Mirai here because you cannot buy hydrogen yet at public stations. Hopefully they'll be making a change to that soon. But in the meantime, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you think the Mirai should be a vehicle that is more widely available. Obviously, with all the incentives, the tax credits, the free fuel, it makes a lot of sense for people who live in California and Hawaii to lease the car because you can get a fantastic lease deal on it. But if Toyota is serious, they really need to improve the infrastructure of hydrogen availability, because until then, the BEVs, the battery electric vehicles, are really going to be taking over, and that's kind of how I see it, because of the charging infrastructure is just so much further along. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed Alex's video. I want to thank Alex, of course, for helping me with filming that car while he had it for literally just 2 days at his home area. But with all that said, if you guys are also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching, and also don't forget to subscribe to Alex's channel. Obviously, we'll include a link in the description below.